Were you circumcised, Victoria?
So many young women have bled to death because of this procedure.
So basically, my clitoris was cut off, and it wasn't cut off by any nurses.
A Nollywood actress recently said something that got a lot of people talking online. She said, female genital mutilation, what we call FGM for short, gave her self-control. And at first, that might sound almost like empowering, like discipline, but the moment you actually understand what FGM is and what it does to the body, that idea doesn't hold up, because this is not self-control, this is not culture, and this is definitely not empowerment. I mean, this is an act of cutting off a child's body, all in the name of controlling her sexuality. And today in this video, instead of arguing opinions, we are going to look at this for what it is, factually, medically, and realistically. Because narratives like this don't just stay online. They shape how people think and how people develop with time. Now, to be fair, she was speaking from her own experience. She said going through FGM helped her say no and mean it.
Were you circumcised, Victoria?
Yes, I was. Because I grew up in the village with my grandmother.
Why you put your hand?
No, but that is what is helping me. Oh. If that's the best thing that they did for me.
And no one can take away what she feels about her own life. That's her personal experience. But here, one person's experience doesn't define the reality of millions of others. And this is where it is very important for us to really separate something clearly. Coping with something harmful is not the same thing as that thing being beneficial.
Trying to urinate after FGM is a really traumatizing experience within itself, because one, is not as easy anymore, and two, it hurts.
FGM is illegal in Nigeria under the Violence Act, Persons Prohibition Act, and it's classified by the World Health Organization as a practice that has no medical benefit.
FGM, there is no benefit to it. It's painful, it's infection, causes trauma, and childbirth complication.
So when we frame something as positive, the question becomes, so what exactly are we normalizing? Because once you step away from personal stories and look at the body itself as a whole, a very different picture starts to form. Up to this point, we've been talking about female genital mutilation in words, but words can sometimes feel distant, almost abstract. So let's make this more concrete. I am going to show you guys a medical illustration, not to shock you, but to give you a clear understanding of what actually changes during this act. Look at this picture. This is normal anatomy. Everything you are seeing here serves a purpose: protection, sensation, and the natural flexibility the body needs for functions like urination, menstruation, and childbirth. Nothing here is extra and nothing is accidental. The body is structured this way for a reason. Take a look when FGM is introduced. These structures are altered. In type 1, there is damage or removal of part of the clitoral area. And this isn't just about sexuality, it's an area rich in nerve endings. I mean, part of the body's sensory system. When these things are damaged, the body loses part of that function. In type 2, more tissue is removed, affecting multiple structures. At this stage, we are no longer talking about a minor change. If you look at the picture, you see that the anatomy itself is permanently altered. Then there is type 3, which is even more severe. The vaginal opening is narrowed, sometimes sealed with scar tissues, and that affects basic bodily functions like urination can become more difficult, menstrual flow can be obstructed, and childbirth becomes significantly more complicated. There are also other forms like pricking, piercing, or incising, but the outcomes remains the same: damage to the tissue that the body actually needs to function. So when you look at this medically, what you are seeing isn't improvement. You are seeing loss of structure, of function, and in many cases, loss of experience that should never have been compromised in the first place. And once you understand that, the real life consequences of FGM starts to make sense to you. In many cases, FGM is performed on young girls.
My story of being a survivor of female genital mutilation. The fact that at the age of 7, I was pinned down by 3 women. My clitoris was cut with a blade, no anesthetic. My labia minora was cut with a blade as well. No anesthetic, no nothing. I literally saw blood. I saw my blood. I felt the pain.
There's no anesthesia, no sterile environment, and often no proper medical tools. The body responds immediately, of course, with trauma.
I went through FGM. And would I be crazy to say that that is my Roman Empire? Because a day does not go without me thinking about that day. I am justified to never forget that day and have every right to think about that day every single day of my life. I know it sounds like I re-traumatize myself every time, but I think and wonder what was the point. I remember when they were cutting me, no meds, nothing, you're not sedated. I watched the entire thing because whoever was holding me, like they normally hold your eyes so that you don't see what's happening.
Severe bleeding can occur. Infection can set in quickly, including tetanus and sepsis. The pain itself can push the body into shock. Some children don't even survive the procedure.
So many young women have bled to death because of this procedure. And I am so lucky that I didn't bleed to death at the front of my grandma's house.
And for those who do, the body doesn't simply move on. It carries the injury forward. Years later, those early changes can show up again in adulthood. When a woman goes through childbirth, the body relies on flexibility and normal tissue structure. Scar tissue from female genital mutilation doesn't respond the same way. That can lead to obstructed labor where the baby cannot pass through as expected. It often results in emergency interventions, including surgical delivery. In some cases, there are tears between internal structures, leading to conditions like fistulas, where a woman may experience continuous leakage. These are not short-term complications. They can affect someone's life permanently, for life. So when the conversation shifts to we are controlling, it's worth asking what that control actually costs. Beyond childbirth, the long-term effects can show up in everyday life. Some women deal with ongoing pain or recurrent infections. Others experience difficulty with menstruation, depending on how the anatomy was altered. Intimacy can also be affected, not just physically, but emotionally, because the experience is no longer what it's naturally meant to be. And then there is the psychological side. Anxiety, depression, and unresolved trauma. These can stay present longer after the physical wounds have healed. So when FGM is described as something beneficial, it's important to understand that these long-term realities are often not talked about. Now let's come back to the core idea behind that claim. The idea that FGM somehow creates self-control by reducing sexual desire.
These communities, they had a belief that, family honor depended on female chastity. So, reducing women's sexual desire and preventing, premarital sex, all to guarantee, virginity before marriage, was actually just seen as protection.
Medically, that's not how the body works. FGM can damage tissue, yes. It can reduce sensation, yes, but it does not erase desire. That part of human biology doesn't just disappear because something was cut or altered. What actually happens is more complicated. The desire can still be there, but now it exists alongside pain, discomfort, or difficulty. So instead of control, what you get is a kind of internal conflict, more like confusion, where the body and the experience no longer align the way they are supposed to be. And that's an important distinction because the real self-control here is something that is learned and developed. It's not something that comes by giving physical injuries to people. And this is where the conversation gets a bit uncomfortable with me, but I still need to say it out. If the goal is truly to control sexual behavior, then why is this practice directed almost entirely at girls? Boys are not subjected to the same level of bodily alteration in the name of discipline. Instead, they are taught, guided, and given the space to develop self-control over time. But for girls, the approach is different. And that makes it so uncomfortable. And what's even more complex is that in many cases, these practices are being carried out by women themselves. Our mothers, our aunties, grannies, not necessarily because they want to cause harm, but because it's something that was done to them and it becomes normalized over time in the name of tradition. And that's how cycles like this continue. Not because people question them, but because they accept it as culture. And let me say this again. Female genital mutilation doesn't just affect that girl who goes through it. It follows her into every role she steps into her later life. She becomes a woman, a partner, a wife. And now, intimacy, something that is supposed to be natural, mutual, and human, can become complicated. Not because she doesn't want connection, but because her body doesn't respond the way it was designed to. So sometimes what happens? She shows up out of obligation. She participates in sexual activities because it's expected of her, but the experience itself is not fully there. And that doesn't just affect her, it affects the whole relationship. Because intimacy is not just physical, it is emotional, it is connection, it is presence. Now, imagine that on a larger scale. Think about a sister, a daughter, a wife. Think about how many women that are carrying this quietly, adjusting, adapting, and never really talking about it. And then we still turn around and ask, is this necessary? Or have we just accepted something so long that we stopped questioning what it actually costs? So let's bring everything back to the original question. Does FGM create self-control? Absolutely no, it doesn't. What it does is create harm, physical, psychological, and in many cases, lifelong consequences that were never necessary to begin with. Self-control, on the other hand, is something that comes from education, from understanding, and from having the ability to make informed choices about your own body and your own life. It doesn't come from removing part of the body or altering it in ways that can interfere with how it's meant to function. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope this video makes sense to you and gave you something to think about. If this hits home for you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy, stay grounded. I'll see you in the next one.